Welcome back to another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. I'm Joe, joined by Mel. We have a big episode for you today, diving into one specific step of the strong family path, and that is the relationships in the household.
Welcome back to the Strong Family Project podcast, where we guide you on the path to raising confident, independent, and resilient children in a strong family environment.
All right, before we dive into the big episode, Mel, what's the best thing you ate in the last week?
Oh, it's got to be the lemon blueberry sourdough scones that I had to grate butter to make.
First time grating?
It was actually way harder than I expected, and they were incredible.
We've had one of our children, the middle child's gotten more into making healthier twists on recipe, healthy-ish. I'll give him healthy-ish recipes. Been looking them up on YouTube and wanting to spend time together making them. And fortunately, really leaned into it. A lot of it he's been able to do himself. Let's list some people off. Let's list some off so that people have ideas. He did a protein peanut butter quote unquote dessert, which was basically like some peanut butter, some vanilla protein, some maple syrup, put some chia seeds in it and some mini chocolate chips, and he stirred it all together and turned to basically a ball.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a healthy cookie though.
Yeah, healthy's relative. I think that's a little bit of a stretch when you're talking maple syrup. But however, it is, as someone in the health and fitness space, it is situational dependent. And he's a little bit underweight. He's one that we mentioned in the podcast a while ago that a doctor told us to feed him like mac and cheese and sour cream or something like that. We're like, all right, we're not going back to this doctor. However, he has finally come around, and this has been interesting because we don't want to give a kid like it's always on his mind about weight or anything like that. You don't want to play that game with children. You have to let them go through their own process a lot of the time. And we had one that was a little bit thicker and he's leaned out, and one that's been a little bit under, and naturally he's just been eating more as he gets more active. And so we give him more freedom with making what he wants because we're excited that he is buying into it. And Mel has to be very careful because Mel likes to say things, and I always tell her, don't say anything. Mel loves to say things. So when he's eating a little more, don't say, oh, isn't it good that you're eating more? Don't you feel better? Aren't you glad that you're finally
I told you,
We don't play that game. We let him explore. Here's one example. What else has he made, Mel?
Last night we tried, so he smashed strawberries, add a little bit of maple syrup and chia seeds and let it sit, and then it becomes like a jam, like a homemade jam. And then we froze it, like you drop it on like a pan, put it in the freezer, so they're like little pancake shapes. And then this morning we dipped it in melted chocolate. So I know, like we were saying healthy-ish, but the fact is he spends a lot of time on his online time that he's allotted looking at cooking like steaks and these different recipes, and he finds cool stuff. And then yesterday he tried one and it did not work, and it was disgusting. But I love that he tried it, and we didn't make him feel bad about that. And I wanted to just comment because you said that sometimes I say something, and I truly have had to step back and hold it to myself because he'll come home from school and didn't eat his sandwich. I started making him only a half a sandwich, and inside I have anxiety about that. But I really just wanted to. I really worked on not saying something because I know it'll just make it worse. And now suddenly he must be going through a growth spurt, and he's eating a lot more. And I'm glad because soccer's coming up, and I want to make sure that he is eating enough. But again, it's that balance of, I think because we didn't say too much about it, he now is finding his own recipes. We're letting him do that, and he is eating more.
It's become less resistant because we didn't make a big deal out of it. He hasn't made a big deal of it, and it's just come around naturally. It hasn't been a kind of tug of war over it. And so there's another one. We made some, it's been a crazy week, but just sharing some options for you to look into. We've been doing a lot with sourdough. We've had the starter kicking around, and Mel got big into looking up some recipes. We did a sourdough starter pretzel bread, and then the pepperoni roll.
Oh, he loved that. And that was good leftovers too.
Hawaiian bread. That was gone real fast. It was not good leftovers. I had one. Mel's making some sourdough Hawaiian bread today to move out the carbohydrates into the protein. We always have yogurt. We've mentioned that before. The reason why he started exploring and made that one recipe he didn't like, which was like a mashed banana microwave
brownie
cake thing. And those I've tried to make one. It came out horrendous before. Like it looks okay online, but it tastes like a dirty car wash sponge after 10 washes. It was awful. It's exactly what it tastes like.
Okay, I believe you. I didn't taste it.
We were big into the yogurt. They were blending strawberries last night, putting in yogurt and adding a scoop of vanilla protein to it.
Oh, but what I think you were going to say is 2 nights ago, we ran out of yogurt.
Yeah.
And that was like, Henry's, there's no yogurt. What am I going to do? And that's when he found these recipes and tried different stuff. It's almost like we talk with our kids about out of boredom comes really cool creativity sometimes. And out of this like mini crisis of not having yogurt came this wonderful idea to start new things.
If there's one thing I'd recommend you make at home, it's yogurt.
Yeah.
We do the sourdough, we do the kombucha, we do the kefir, we do all these other things that we enjoy. However, everyone in the family uses the yogurt. We use it in recipes. The kids eat it. They make their own. We just make plain yogurt in the crock pot. It is the simplest to make. Basically, you heat up yogurt past 180, let it cool to 120, and you add a tablespoon or two of the previous batch of yogurt, let it sit overnight, and it all turns into yogurt in the crock pot. So it's super simple, and everyone uses it. I think that would be a big money saver, but also a quality of food saver for your family.
But you heat a gallon of milk, not a gallon of yogurt.
Yeah, that's right.
Just in case somebody actually wants to do it. And the other thing is, we've watched Logan and Henry create their own recipes with it. So they add protein, some kind of jam, chia seeds, whatever. And then Everett used to not want it, but now he gets excited and asks them to make it. And now when I do it for him, I ask him to get the ingredients for me. So it's also this wanting to be together and teaching them independence. And it's really cool to see Everett kind of follow suit, and he could almost do it on his own now.
That was my pre-topic. Before we get into the relationship steps of the path, did you have one that you'd like to discuss? Question or topic?
I didn't have one, but I wanted to hear what your favorite recipe was recently.
I did like my one sourdough roll that I was allotted.
Oh,
yes.
What's it called? Pepperoni roll.
Yeah. So almost a year ago, I stopped eating desserts, and I pretty much stopped eating bad food. I was just done with it. It is something I did enjoy before. It's not like I had this super willpower. Like I would have the ice cream and the pizza every Friday. Cheat day was really Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was really 3 days. Live that lifestyle. And I believe I mentioned it and told the story on the podcast before, but I'll give you the abbreviated version. I wasn't feeling good because we were eating a bunch of junk food. My brothers were in town. We were going out to do some hiking and then stopping to get ice cream. And I was in line at ice cream. The people around were very unhealthy, and some couldn't get out of the car. One person had to go to the car, get the ice creams at the window, and go back so they could sit in the air-conditioned car and eat them. And no judgment, because like I said, I have been there. I've done things like that, but I realized that's not the path I want to go down anymore. If I don't want to live this life that they're having and I had, then I shouldn't be doing the things that I did and they're doing. And that includes just, we're out, we should go get ice cream, we should go have dessert. And then just dealing without it has been great. And none of the desserts really speak to me anymore. And had a huge sweet tooth, but just gave it all up. I would have to say the sourdough roll is like something more hearty. Mm-hmm. The kids I was planning on making a sandwich with it, but since I was only allotted one, I didn't have a second to make a sandwich bread of the kid. I'm just kidding. But I use the go-tos. I use the homemade oats. You do a batch of that each week. Sprinkle some granola on top. Do the yogurt. Always, I have 5 or 6 eggs every day with some sourdough English muffin that you make that I toast up, and just really enjoy the eating. And since I enjoy the eating, it's not like I'm dealing with where I feel like I need to have a little bit of this. Let's throw some chocolate chips in this, and let's add some maple syrup to this. And I know can be a bridge food for some people, so I'm not talking down to it, but it's what I tend to avoid now.
And on top of that, it's not just because you made that decision, that didn't mean that the rest of us who live with you made that decision. However, it did push us to find healthy alternatives. And that we always come back to constant gentle pressure. So yes, you and I will have the Brussels sprouts with our dinner, and the kids won't necessarily. But over time, I've noticed that they've taken on some of the healthier options. Like Henry just looking up those recipes, and he wants them to be healthier.
He's been cooking sandwiches too. He's been getting into oven sandwiches and turkey sandwiches and things. So
he wants us to buy a smoker because he wants to smoke meat. And I'm like, hey, if you wanted to invest your time into figuring out how you're going to make that happen, we can provide the smoker. You're going to provide the skills of how to cook the meat in there. So it's almost like we see growth through it, and always bringing it back to the strong family path. We want our kids to be resilient, independent, confident, and that's definitely happening in the kid I could see Henry growing up and moving out and like having so many good options of what to eat.
It's going to lead us into today's discussion, but I'll say one more thing on it before we fully shift gears. And I'm glad you mentioned acknowledging that we're different people with this stuff, and they adopt some of the habits. And I have learned not to say much if they are indulging in something that I don't indulge in anymore. But I like to think of myself as a fairly logical person, and I do hear a lot of people wanting to feel better. They want more energy. They want more money in their bank accounts. They want all these things. And the biggest mover is sometimes to quit buying as much crap. And that does have to do with non-food too, but it's like, all right, let's go out and buy ice cream for everyone. Let's go out to dinner. It's $100 bill. Let's go out and order pizza. If this night is going to be going out to dinner night as a quote unquote treat. Great. You're $200 later. Now you have diarrhea and can't sleep. That's not a treat. I think we have a misconception of treat, and just because someone says, "Oh, you should treat yourself," to what, sugar high, get the ice cream sweats, you're all red in the face, and you feel like trash the next day. That's not a treat, and I had done it for a long time, and it just took me to take a step back, and say, "What the heck am I doing? Like, why am I spending this much money that I could be investing in my family in other ways, like buying Henry a smoker so that he can learn a skill?" And so it just didn't make any sense to me anymore. Giving up on that life.
Even Henry's birthday recently, he didn't feel great. He wanted me to make like a normal dessert. He didn't even eat it. He didn't even have it after he felt better. And I'm excited about next
Say
year.
something?
Well, I didn't, because honestly, if he keeps on this track of creating healthy options, I think it would be so cool if his buddies came over and he had this healthy option. And it just shows other kids too that there are other ways of doing things. And maybe I will say something and just remind him, last year you didn't even eat your dessert. So maybe we can do something different this time.
So a lot of people that listen to the podcast actually don't have families yet, and they're prepping to have families. And I give them a ton of credit. I give you a ton of credit. I've received emails, people who are just a very young family, or they're thinking ahead that they want to engage in the strong family path. They want to have this routine set up. They want to have their core values set up with their significant others so that they can run a smoother household and truly enjoy family life. And it is tremendously enjoyable. And it is even amplified when you have those other side items under control so you can really engage into a deeper family life. So with that in mind, we're talking about a step of the strong family path today. One step is understanding relationships in the household. And that relationship is you and your significant other, you to each child, but we're going to go way back to the very beginning of it and only talk about one today because we haven't dove in as deep. And it relates to everyone on the podcast, and that's the relationship between you and your significant other. We have mentioned before that with kids, we do not beat around the bush. We've told them, like, you exist because your mother and I love each other, and that is an important relationship. We're not going to put this aside, our love for each other, and go 20 plus years between the first child all the way through and the last child all the way through, and then all of a sudden not know the person that you're hanging out with and not enjoy those 20 plus years in between of each other's companies. So we're going to put aside a little bit of the kids talk and talk about the relationship talk about the relationships. Said talk way too many times. We're going to discuss the relationship, husband and wife style relationship.
Thesaurus. That's what we need. But I think I talked about that a couple hours ago.
Thesaurus, yeah.
You like my quirks. We have a good time together.
We do have a good time together. And so there's a couple of things that I want to discuss that helps us maintain the relationship. And then I'm also going to give Mel some time, but before she gets on the podcast, I don't tell her the topic. So that's why I typically go first, so she has an opportunity to think about it. And so here's a couple key movers in our relationship. First one is having clear communication. I don't always want to talk about what Mel wants to talk about. I really want to talk about what Mel wants to talk about. And sometimes it just takes her getting it off her chest, and she respects that. I'm listening, and sometimes, why don't you say something back? But sometimes she's, all right, I just wanted to talk about it, and understands that. It took a lot of my mental capacity to sit through that whole discussion on something I didn't want to talk about, just to hear it out and not make the other person feel like what they want to discuss is irrelevant.
Do you have an example of a topic that
come back from school and you want to talk about like what this kid said. Like Mel volunteers a lot at school, which is great so that we are engaged in the education process, influencing it in both the parent advisory councils, but also in the actual classroom where Mel helps math. And then she'll come back and say, this child said this thing, and I just want you to be aware of it, and this and that. All right, well.
Okay, so you're talking about communicating well.
Yes.
So really, I think a lot of that's helped us out is knowing when that should happen. And we had one of our like 90-day meetings and we talked about this, and you had mentioned, and this was more, I think, work related stuff, but you're like, if you have a list of things for me, I need you to bring them to me, well, like when I'm sitting down to lunch, because that's when I can fully attend to whatever you need, versus always like pulling someone aside. Do you have a second? Do you have a second? Do you have a minute? Do you have a minute? And then all of a sudden you're so scatterbrained. We've had to communicate about how to communicate. We implemented this plan of how if I have something that can wait, and I can wait and then talk to you about it when you're having lunch. That way I know that you're going to be more available for you. You're going to be more available to listen to what I have to say. Or sometimes I'll walk into the room if you're like working, like have something to discuss. Do you have a moment now to attend to it, or should I come back?
Yes, and it's very fair. So I think whatever is right for you and your spouse, come up with the communication strategy. We have our weekly meetings. We have our quarterly family discussions. However, that doesn't take care of all the day-to-day nuance of running a household and running a relationship and dealing with someone and they're distracted and already stressed out. It's not a situation for success. And so we had to remove the emotions from that and say, all right, it's not that I don't want to hear you right now. It's that I'm working through this other thing. So let's come up with a time where I know I need to have my other stuff checked at the door so that I can hear these conversations. So I expect it. I don't like surprises. I don't like in the middle of something, this has got to be dealt with, but I'm also dealing with something else important. There's a hierarchy of what needs to get done and accomplished, and respecting that is important in relationship and communication.
It really comes down to respect. I have to respect that you work from home, that you need to have time to think about work, and I could just walk in and assume you're not working or something, or that I'm more important. Why can't you put that aside? That's not what it's about. It's really about figuring out when is the best time to talk. And another strategy is going on a walk. And we haven't been as consistent about this. And I could tell I get more pent up with things I want to tell you. And then as soon as we're walking, I'm like, man, why have we stepped away from this? Our road is icy and terrible. So I think that's been our excuse lately. But we took a walk the other day and I felt so refreshed that we could talk for 30 minutes straight without the disruption of something work related or a kid or whatever. So walking together as often as possible gives us that time to connect.
It's a tough few weeks on the mountain.
Yep.
We are big advocates of walking and talking every day. And we've said that before. But we've fallen off a little bit of every day because we live on a road that is a private road, and it snowed like 2 feet. Like we had to shovel the road so that we could get Mel's minivan down because it bottomed out and couldn't get it down the road. And it's like a half-mile road, and it's icy and slushy, and we're on the shady side of the mountain, which all the year it's amazing, except for about 6 to 8 weeks when we go through this process. And we walk down the mailbox to get the mail. It's a little under a half-mile walk and back. But it still took us like 20 minutes to just slushy up to your ankles and like icy snow. And it's not ideal to have conversations during. So we did last week get out and go down. Just you go down the road half a mile the other way. You're now on the sunny side, and you can go hike and walk. So we try to have those times together, walking time, get back to it. We definitely feel like something's off when you go through a season where it's just not as practical.
And I think sometimes someone might say, I don't have time to go for a 15 minute or half an hour walk every day. But I do think there is time if you make it. However, if you actually do it, it almost then gives you motivation to find the time again. Because the other day when we went for that walk and I felt like so much better, that almost reminds you, oh, this is why we're so adamant about doing this every day or as often as possible. So sometimes if you can get through the excuses, just do the walk or do that thing that will give you some time alone with your spouse, then if it goes well, you'll want to do it again. You'll want to repeat behavior that you get something out of.
So I do have one more to discuss, but I want to turn it over to you, Mel. What's something that you think is an important relationship builder? We have a lot of young listeners to start another family. And even on the other side, people whose kids are moving out of the house and now they need to tap the effort to reconnect. What do you have as relationship building advice?
This is going to kind of sound a little silly, but spend time together, whatever the situation may be. Because for us, like we'll drive to Costco. And even though it's or Costco, whatever, some furniture place. And then also like in Costco. If you find something you need to do, like an errand you need to run, and if you happen to be so busy that you're not finding time with your spouse, try to do that together. Because then you still have to run the errand, you still have to get that thing done, but then you get to do it with the person that you care about. And honestly, we have a lot of humor. I think that's the other thing is if you can insert humor into your relationship, it's just so much better. Or at least it just makes things more lighthearted. So my advice would be if you have those things during the week where you have to run an errand or do something seemingly boring, if you could grocery shop together, it's just a little bit of time. It's not like you have to plan some big date night or some big gesture. It's just the simple things that we do on a day-to-day basis that we can do together, and we end up having a really good time and just reconnecting.
I'm going to go very small with my next one before we go big. So I'm going to go both ends of the spectrum, very tactical and then very high level. The tactical one is the same with children. When they come into the room, greet them and treat them like they are important. And sometimes, I shouldn't speak in such generalities, but I've seen it many times come into play where you're on your phone, distracted, someone comes in the room, you don't even look up, you take for advantage. It's not how you would treat a stranger. Why would you treat a family member like that? Because you see them so often. Shouldn't take that for granted either. They're going to be around for a finite amount of time. So whatever you're doing, check it. And Henry does a good job, our middle son. When I speak to him, he pauses his tab and always looks up. That makes me feel like what I have to say is important. That's important to do in a relationship, and that's important to do with your children, is take that moment, take a breath when they come in and make them feel like it's important that they walked in the room.
So I do this with the kids in the morning, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I think it's worth repeating. It's my goal that when they walk into the kitchen, which is where I always am, every morning I stop, I turn, and I give them a hug. Whether they want it or not. Like, it's funny because one of them will like hug me back, one of them's about it, but you could tell they still expect it and want it. And then a few weeks ago, I noticed I wasn't doing that for you. So I started to do that. So I'll usually be sitting at the table working on my morning joke for the kid or for the kids or whatever. And I'll hear you walk in, and I used to just keep doing what I'm doing. But now I make sure to say hi to you, to greet you. Sometimes I get up and hug you. I'm going to get better at that.
I know. It's like get up on the stair.
Yeah, we have a little...
Our height discrepancy is...
We have a little staircase next to the refrigerator that goes up. And I step on the first step so I can hug him, because otherwise I'm like below your shoulder. But that's something that I've done with the kids, and now I'm starting to do that with you. And just like you want to show the person that you're excited that they're there. And you have to actually be excited. But I think it's almost if you start doing it and it gets more fun. But that's what I do in the morning, and I'm going to get even better at doing that with you. Because I do get excited when you walk into the room.
Do appreciate it. And you're very good with it, holding us all accountable for that.
Can I do one now, or did you want to do your other?
You absolutely go ahead. Okay. I only have one more left.
Okay, so I have one. I think is super important. We need to take the time to compliment or show gratitude to each other. Especially for things that kind of just fade into the background. For example, I wash and fold all the laundry, or I wash the dishes, or even just cooking meals, for example. Sometimes when it's things that we all just are accustomed to having done, we don't stop and thank each other for that. So I think it's really important to stop. And we do this as part of our family meetings, but I think it's even more powerful if you just do it alone with your significant other. You look each other in the eye and you share some kind of gratitude or some kind of compliment you want to give them, so they feel seen and heard, and that what they're contributing to the family is valued.
Along those lines, I'm going to go to the higher level one, and not in terms of importance, just looking from the very high view down at family structure. You and your significant other need to get on the same page about how the household is going to operate. Don't care what you choose. Don't care who does what. But you need to be on the same page so people aren't feeling significantly slighted. And it's important to have a conversation that goes something like this. Things are going to be out of balance a little bit. When the kids were young, Mel was up all night and working with them and changing diapers and everything. Everything was out of whack. She was doing significantly more. And there was a time before that where I was working 12-hour days, 14-hour days, running the facilities, working multiple jobs so that we could set up a life. And that was out of balance. But we had the conversation showing gratitude to each other, like Mel just said, and respecting, like, hey, you're doing so much right now. I really appreciate that. Trying to pick up the slack in small areas, but it's not going to be an equal, you put X amount of hours in and these tasks are valued to these tasks. And like that gets very transactional in a household. And I don't like that in a relationship. And so it's important to have those conversations. Hey, like things are out of whack. Things aren't fair. Like it's unfair that she had to wake up and do all those things. And then I was at work by the time she got up the last time, and it was like all over the place. But having an appreciation for what the other person does, not making it the old tit for tat and exchange of like you do this on this day. Here's your chore chart. Here's my chore chart. Here's your bank account. Here's my bank account. Listen, you can set up your household however you want. You could have separate bank accounts. You can even have your own chore chart if you want, but you have to be on the same page with the other person when you do it like that. And so regardless of how you want to do it, have the conversations, have clarity, understand that things can be out of balance sometimes, and decide what works for both of you in the situation that you're in. And don't let it just bubble underneath the surface and feel like there's some sort of unfairness or someone's getting slighted. And that starts to chip away at a relationship if you don't get clarity on however you want to do it.
And since earlier, we were talking about how this is geared more towards younger couples or couples that either are just starting to have kids or are about to. It's really important to have this conversation. On the one hand, it's good to have a conversation about what is going to be expected as the wife or as the husband. So I think you have to acknowledge everyone grew up in a certain kind of situation in their own family. And I think a lot of people just tend to fall back on habits. This is what my mom did. This is what my dad did. So now I'm going to expect that in my relationship instead of actually having this conversation. And to give a concrete example, when I was pregnant with Logan, I was deciding whether I was going to go back to work or not, and I decided to go back part-time. So I was going to work 3 days a week. And you were teaching, and we had the gyms as well. So we had to have this conversation, like, how is this going to play out when the baby wakes up during the night? Because I know there's some couples that decide, hey, we're going to get up like every other time. And because you had to get up early to go teach in the morning, we together decided that was going to be solely on me. I was going to be the one getting up at night. And I could easily see how if you don't have that conversation and that understanding between each other, you could very quickly get resentful of the other person, just like you were saying. So again, going back to our first topic about communication, we were still learning. And was it still hard? Or like sometimes I would feel a little slighted, maybe, but I would remember we had this conversation and we made this decision. And if I'm feeling upset about it, then I need to go back and have another conversation. So I think it's important to work on that communication. We've been married for 17 years, so we're pretty good at it now, but even still, sometimes we miscommunicate. So we have to make sure that we are that we're not just creating our family organization based on whatever you grew up with or whatever that you think you expect. You need to present those expectations to your significant other. And interestingly, I was listening to a podcast about this, and they were talking about how a lot of people these days they go on a date and they don't necessarily bring up the tough topics. If you are dating someone who doesn't want to get married, you should probably know that. Or if they're going to have a certain expectation that you don't agree with, you probably should discuss that before you get married. And this actually comes up sometimes with our kids because we obviously have the way we run our household. And then sometimes I'll tell my boys, I want you to know that Daddy and I decided to run things this way. I have these roles, Daddy has those roles. Because Daddy does that, I can stay home with you and I can volunteer at school or whatever the case may be. But I don't want them to be naive and think that every family's like that and that they're going to get to someday with their significant other decide how their family's going to run. But it really comes back to whatever you decide is fine as long as you're both on the same page.
One more caveat with that is make sure that you both are on the same page, not your friends, not your neighbors, not even your family, not us, not anybody else. It's you and your significant other deciding how you want to live your life. Block out all those outside voices. They are completely tainted with their own experience. We're tainted from our 17 years. This is how we did it. I'm not going to tell you it's right. I'm not going to go that far and make an overreaching statement. Your parents did it a certain way. Your neighbors do it a certain way. Society says it's a certain way. Your roommate at college has their own perspective. None of that matters if you and your significant other can't get on the same page. Just like we tell our kids that they exist because of a love in our relationship, and they're like very close to, they're very close in importance. Like everyone else is so much further away than that. I'm not marrying Mel so that someone else's opinion can affect how we live life. Like it's not even on my radar anymore. And I get how that is influential on people. So I want to make sure I put those words out there. How we decide to live, we have a more traditional household. The reason why I was able to lean in and grow a very successful company is because I did not need to worry about things as much as home. Mel said, hey, I got this area, you go get that area. And I was only able to be successful in that area because things were taken care of so well. And she was able to lean into it and not have to go back to work because she knew that I had things taken care of on the other front. And we divided and conquered. Doesn't have to be that way. You can split it up. You can do it however you guys decide. But there is no right or wrong answer in terms of, well, here's how a household should always run. This is the way it's worked out for us. We've been able to take care of the kids because someone's responsibility happens at 100%. We're both super responsible for certain aspects of raising our kids, certain aspects around the household, certain aspects of earning money, but it only works if the other person is also taking care of their area.
And I like that you mentioned that we all have our own biases, because that is certainly true. And also, this is going to involve some sacrifice. Just because you're not going to necessarily find this perfect solution that everyone's always happy about. It will involve sacrifice. Me deciding to be the one to get up at night with the kids, I wanted to do it, but it still was a sacrifice to a degree. And I remember this one particular moment. I was driving home. I was driving to go get Logan from the sitters where he was twice a week when I was working part-time. And I saw my coworker and her husband walking their baby in a stroller on the road. And this was at the time when you were teaching 7 to 3, and then you were at the gym from 3 to 7. And I saw them walking, and my heart broke a little bit because I was like, I don't have that. I don't get to go home to a husband who's there. We can go take a walk together. And it did hurt, but I also realized we decided to run our home this way, and I'm going to have faith that we decided what's best for us, and we are reaping the benefits now in a lot of ways. But back then, I still had to fight that internal bias of like, I kind of want that. I kind of want to be able to come home and just go for this walk with my husband and my baby. And my point in saying that is you are going to make a decision, hopefully, by communicating with your own significant other on how you live your life together. But you still might see things out there that you might get jealous of or that you wish you had. And it's important to recognize that and not let it eat away at you.
That's a very good point. And understanding it'll take, not sometimes, a lot of the time, it'll take short-term sacrifices for the long-term benefit of the family. Sometimes it takes short-term sacrifices for the long-term benefit of you. It is all relative to your ability to be able to have some delayed gratification. So in the same token, I'll be teaching and people are near the end of the school year starting to plan these elaborate summer vacations. I can't go on one of those. I'll be running a company. I'll be doing homeschooling. I didn't do summer school, but I did homeschool. I coached sports because I wanted to be such a provider at the beginning that we would have the opportunity to potentially have Mel stay home with the kids and grow our family. And so enjoy your vacations. That's really cool. That's right for some people to go out and have their planned vacations and have their resets. Completely get it. But that just wasn't our life when we were young because we knew we had to make the sacrifices early so that we can be sitting around and sharing things with you later on. Not that this was the plan, but now we start to celebrate and reap the rewards of those earlier decisions because we're able to lean into our family and each other a lot more.
Really, a lot of it really had to do with us trusting each other. Like you said, you could go to work even now when you take a you go for a week-long trip to a different state to do a seminar or whatever, you can be there and do your thing because you don't have to worry about what's going on here. You know, I have it under control. We have this mutual trust in each other that we're each taking care of our roles. But again, even though we're operating independently in those roles, a lot of times we have to be able to come together on those walks, or even doing the podcast together, or at dinner, or whatever that might look like. We have to make sure that we stay connected.
Decisions have consequences. And Mel has a great example there. I'm off to Orlando in a few days to speak at a seminar and to be fully present and to do business education and teaching, consulting for fitness business owners. If I was worried about home, I would do a very poor job there. If I was constantly like picking up my phone between every seminar, making the people in the room feel less important, that I have this other thing going on at home, I would not be doing as an effective job, and I probably would lose that opportunity. And so for me to be fully present, I need to be fully confident, trust that Mel has the rest covered, in which she does. And so I am able to provide more for the family and be present in those situations because I'm not worried about things or things bubbling underneath the surface or anything like that. I can be fully effective at where I need to be.
And I have one more thing.
Last thought.
Yeah, last thought. If you decide a certain path is working for you for now, that might change. Once we had another baby, I actually stayed home full time. As time progresses, you can't just necessarily stick to whatever you decided if it's not working. So make sure you're always open to being able to come back to the table and say, this isn't working for me. Can we please go back to the drawing board and figure out something else that's going to be effective for us?
Oh my gosh. How do we have those conversations? You visit strongfamilyproject.com. You download the 7 steps of the path, which are free for you, which includes a 90-day meeting. Every 90 day, you do the big planning and say, hey, is this still true, the path that we're on? What do we need to change? What do we need to work on? Then you put your head down, you work for 90 days, and then you can adapt again. You have those regular scheduled opportunities to have those conversations and change of direction, like Mel meant, already scheduled for you. If you're following the plan and not just blowing it off and say, oh, no, this isn't important right now. And then all of a sudden there's an emergency and now you have meetings just for emergencies and you're back in a reactive mode and things get more stressful. Just download the free PDF. It's a couple pages. It explains the steps of the path that you can apply to your own family life, just like we're talking about the roles in the household now. The relationship between husband and wife. It's not to tell you what to do. It's tell you, take some time to think about what you want to do and then do it. What do you want to do every 90 days? Sit down and discuss and do it. What are your core values? Sit down, discuss, strategize. What's your morning routine so your day starts successful? What's your dinner routine? All laid out for you. strongfamilyproject.com. Appreciate you listening to an episode. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss, if you're watching on YouTube, drop it right in the comments. Or visit the website and send us an email. We'll be happy to discuss your topics and answer your questions. Thank you for listening to another episode.